JK's World of Golf very generously provide Brendan Telfer at the BTE every Wednesday for us. Telf, welcome.
Good morning, Martin. Good afternoon, Martin. So I can advertise with you, can I? If I want to.
That's it, Brendan, you can. Brad Weber and the Hawke's Bay coach are gutted at what happened with the Shield, Brendan. They're talking like they had nothing to do with that and the players had nothing. The players are gutted at what went on, Brendan.
Yeah, of course, this is what we're getting now, just the standard PR line. Look, I imagine in the 100-year history, or more than 100-year history of the Ranfurly Shield, it's fairly standard practice, isn't it, that when a team lifts the Ranfurly Shield, the new holders go out on the piss and go hard.
Yeah,
and that's, I guess, all that Hawke's Bay did. Unfortunately, they overdid it and they've made fools of themselves, embarrassed themselves. I suppose it's time for the rugby union to step in here and say, look, okay, yeah, it's a wonderful thing, the Ranfurly Shield, even if it has lost a bit of its glory. But once you leave the changing rooms, once you finish with your celebrations in the changing rooms, that's it. No more of this idea of carting the Ranfurly Shield round to shopping malls and pub crawls and God knows what else. That's got to end because that's what happens. These guys get on the booze and the Ranfurly Shield's been lost, hasn't it, on a couple of occasions? So some bloke's had it and then he's been out all night drinking with the Ranfurly Shield and he couldn't remember where he left it. So I think the rugby union have to sort of take a bit of ownership here and step in and say, no, we'll look after the Ranfurly Shield after you guys leave the dressing room the day or the night that you win it, and this sort of stuff will stop because it's just a really bad look for something that's supposedly held in such high esteem in New Zealand sport.
Okay, why weren't the players drug tested, Brendan, and why wasn't the Shield swabbed? And now New Zealand Rugby are doing an investigation, but it's too late now to drug test the players.
Well, no. I mean, that's just a beat-up story. I mean, the guy that is fixing this Ranfurly Shield, and he's been the fixer for a number of incidents that's happened to it, has said that all it is plaster of Paris that Brendan, he himself would put.
It's not, Brendan. Have you ever used plaster of Paris? It sticks together like wet flour. Okay,
so
it's not plaster.
You're saying that's dope. That's something.
It's either cocaine or MDMA. Now, this is not something that.
How do you know that?
Absolutely, Brendan, because I have had a life where I have been around those things and seen those things. Okay.
So yeah, but all you've seen, I presume, is what I've seen. It's a photograph.
Why not swab it? In that case, swab it and reduce the speculation down to nothing. So why won't they do that?
I don't know.
I can tell you why.
Okay.
Because rugby has covered up the sins of its players forever is why, and they will be too embarrassed to know that most of those players were on something afterwards. That's why, Brendan. You and me have been in this game long enough. How many times have we seen stories covered up?
Of course, exactly. But it does genuinely surprise me that a bunch of provincial rugby players would be on something like coke or heroin or something.
No, MDMA. Look, I tell you, Brendan, it's rife. It's rife, mate.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you're not around it. I'm not around it.
No.
But it is rife in that younger generation, mate. They all do it. They go out on weekends. And the thing with these drugs is you just got to look it up on the internet, is that within 24 or 48 hours, they're out of your system. So if you have a few good saunas afterwards, drink a lot of water and so forth, it flushes you out. Like the poor old guy, remember, from Hawke's Bay, what was his name, Lachlan? Who got done for marijuana a few months ago, right? Because he had a few puffs on a joint. That stays in your system for 3 months. These other drugs don't, and these guys know that.
Yeah, okay, I'm hearing all that, but I still think it's a very big call on your part to be saying this is what's happened and this is what this stuff is without...
Okay, here's the other scenario, okay? Here's the other scenario. Someone thought it was a really good idea to put all that stuff over it, line it up in lines, and pretend they were snorting drugs on it.
Yeah, so something doesn't quite add up here.
No.
And I still don't think I've heard your case for the prosecution, but I'm still not convinced at all.
Well, I tell you what, all I need to do is swab that shield, Brendan, and there it is. And if I was the Hawke's Bay Union, I would have had the P guys in the very next day and drug tested it, because as soon as they drug tested it, there's your answer straight away. But instead, they didn't. Instead it's down in Wellington, and in a week's time the union gets hold of it. How convenient.
Anyway, the thing was broken in two, and so in a sense, the broken down Ranfurly Shield itself is a metaphor for the Ranfurly Shield at the competition. Damaged goods, aren't they? Both of them, by the sound of it.
Well, we know how this happens. I mean, look, as you say, everyone jumps on it, humps on it, throws it around. But to try and tell us that it dropped off a concrete bench, Brendan, if that was you that fell off the concrete bench, you'd be in traction, mate. You would have died. I mean, at that force. What did they throw it off? Mate, I said to the CEO yesterday, what did they drop it off the Sky Tower, mate? I went out into the backyard yesterday and took our breadboard, which had a split in it, and a beautiful breadboard, and I threw it onto the concrete path as hard as I could a few times, trying to snap it in half, and it never did.
Yeah, but the Ranfurly Shield is a lot bigger and heavier than a breadboard, so therefore the combined force when it impact would be greater.
A pretty big breadboard.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you what, as I said earlier, Brendan, the only thing missing from this story from the Hawke's Bay players is the dog eating the homework. But, rugby will cover it up as it always has done. Let's move on to the Ryder Cup, mate, because that was brilliant. And I know that you watched a hell of a lot of this over the weekend, right?
I did. I fought off a headache at 3:15 in the morning on Monday morning because I could not go to bed because every single shot in that singles match, the 12 of them, every single shot seemed to have an impact on how the thing was going to finish up. But in the end, it was no surprise. But the result, 16.5, 11.5, 5 pointers, a very clear-cut victory by historic standards in the Ryder Cup. But it really was, I suppose, almost a done deal at the end of the first day. When the Americans on the first day, in 8 matches they played, couldn't win a match out of 8. They tied 3 and lost 5. That was basically the ball game there and then. The Americans suffered a massive mental shock, I think, and they never really recovered from it. Yes, their golf got better. In fact, they won the second half of the Ryder Cup, but the deficit was too big a margin to make up. They were behind something like 8.5, 3.5 at the halfway stage, but they won the last 16 matches 9-7, but it was too big a deficit, as I said. So they fought hard. There was a moment there at about 3 o'clock on Monday morning, which is when I finally went to bed, where I thought the Americans had got down. They only needed 14 points, and they were down to about a potential scoreline of 15-13. And they were just starting to sort of make a bit of a charge, but the two Englishmen, or the two Brits at the back of the field playing in the last singles matches, Fleetwood and McIntyre, managed to sneak home and extend the margin out to 16.5, 13.5, 11.5, whatever it was. So, it was. I think it was the best golf I have ever seen, either in real life or on television, or events that I've covered or commentated on. I can't think of a more compelling, exhilarating golf tournament. That includes major championships. And McIlroy's been saying for some time that this thing now is more important and it carries more kind of clout than any of the 4 major championships. And I think after this event, he's probably right.
I'm not sure, mate. I mean, when you think about that and the history of those kind of things, I mean, but that leads nice into the next question I was going to ask you. Why do the players, or especially the European players, love it so much? I'm hoping they're genuine when they say they love the fact they're playing for a team. It's not about the money for once and all of that kind of stuff. Is it really that?
Yeah, I think it is. If you saw those scenes immediately afterward, it was interesting, when you think of Europe, it's gone through this whole thing called Brexit, and the sort of fractured sort of nature of European unity has sort of been, to some degree, now taken over, and that countries are sort of going after what they want in their own interest. But there was something about that. There was just a unity there. It was an image of European unity, which was in stark contrast to that whole Brexit episode where Britain wanted to get out of Europe, and it did. But there were Brits and, Scandinavians and Austrians and Spaniards kissing and hugging each other, and it was extraordinary. I mean, you can't sort of manufacture that, and it wasn't contrived. It was real. They really felt that as they were a team, and this, I suppose, is what the EU was all about. It's trying to make Europe into one entity that can challenge the likes of America and China and possibly India. And I just got a little bit of a glimpse of that in this lovely old boring thing called sport at 3 o'clock on a Monday morning. So I think, you saw, and the Americans have responded to that. I mean, there was Scotty Scheffler crying the day before after he'd lost his match against someone or other, and McEnroe crying 4 years ago when they lost. And so it's got a special kind of, it's like the Ashes in cricket, I suppose, isn't it? That'd be something I'd like to that.
I'm glad, because golf needs something other than the majors. All right, I'm about to play you, and I don't know whether you've heard, mate. This is the VAR audio conversation between the guy watching the tally and the referee in everything, the Spurs-Liverpool game. It takes about 50 seconds or something, but have a listen to it and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Just checking the offside delay. Yeah, give me 2D line ready after as well for frame 2 after that. That's fine.
Frame 2 there.
Perfect.
I've got the time on this.
2D line on left boot.
Yep. But let me just switch angles. I think it might be this angle better. Happy with this angle?
You organise, you don't.
Yep. 2D line on the boot.
2D line on the boot.
Yep. Okay.
And stop. Check complete. It's fine. Perfect.
Yeah. Off.
Thank you, mate.
Wait. On-field decision was offside. Are you happy with this?
Yeah.
Are you happy with this?
Offside goal. Yeah. That's what it does.
What?
On-field decision was offside. Are you happy with this image? Yeah, it's onside. The image we gave is onside.
Left back.
He's gone offside.
Delay. Ollie's saying to delay.
Red throw.
Pardon?
Ollie's calling in to say delay the game. To complete the decision is offside.
Can't do anything.
Delay the game. Stop the game.
They've restarted the game.
From on the field.
They've restarted. Yeah.
Can't do anything.
Brendan, after that, is it any wonder why the human beings are getting this wrong?
Sounded like an aircraft controller talking to a pilot trying to land a plane in foggy conditions. Yeah, okay, look, I know where you're coming from in this, but I'm standing by this whole system of the VAR, or call it what you like, and these other sports. I'm 100% support this. And, okay, you're going to get the odd case. We got one 2 weeks ago in the Warriors match against the Broncos, where all of those officials, for some inexplicable reason, missed that massive big forward pass. But at the end of the day, it's the human error. As long, Martin, listen to me carefully here, as long as the VARs or the TMOs or whatever system you want to call this electronic detection of mistakes, as long as they get the overwhelming majority of the decisions right, which is a far higher percentage than referees can ever do or officials can ever do with the naked eye, this must remain. And, with all due respect to Liverpool, making a big fuss and a song and a dance about this and demanding an apology, and they've got an apology, and, okay, the guy's got it wrong. If it was the other way around, if that had been Spurs that had been deprived of a legitimate goal, Liverpool couldn't give a toss about it. But when you're on the receiving end of a dodgy decision, you make a big song and dance about it and try to play the moral card and demand the moral high ground. And this is all Liverpool's doing here. Get on with it, guys. It happens. Human error will take place regardless of how sophisticated the software is. Okay?
Wouldn't you rather prefer, though, that... And the thing I love about American sports is one of the things... You watch baseball, Brendan, and the look, guys are throwing to the base. One guy threw yesterday, I was watching at 112 miles an hour. So the ball hit the mitt at 112 miles an hour. Meanwhile, the runner's running there. 99 times out of 100, those umpires get it right. And it used to be with cricket that the umpires get it right. I think we have scared our officials into their natural instincts. If you're a really good referee and you've got a lot of experience, you normally get most decisions right. I would argue with you with that point. And I reckon that what should happen is...
No, I don't agree.
You don't think so?
They might get most right, but they do not get as many right as the VAR or TMO system. And that's my point, that you can get more correct decisions if you use the technology.
But wasn't the technology meant to be foolproof?
Well, it can't be because it's operated by human beings.
There you go.
As I said, you go back to that business at Suncorp Stadium.
The problem with the bunker is that they're not authorised to tell the referee it's a forward pass. And here with what happened with the VAR is that guy got it wrong in the box. He knew he'd got it wrong, but no one had written the rules that said, you can go back to the referee and say, oops, sorry, got it wrong. So he's not allowed to do that.
Well, in both cases, there is this human error. I mean, you're right. It's an anomaly that I see with rugby league that they can't rule on forward passes because they think there's an element of subjectivity about the decisions, so they steer clear from it. I think they might re-look at that idea from next season and bring that in. But I go back to a conversation I had with Stephen Fleming many years ago when it first came into cricket, and I had him in the studio at Radio Sport. I think his book, he just put his book out or something, and it was just at the time when this was being introduced to cricket. They'd had it for the run-outs, but ICC decided they would extend it now to the umpires being able to give LBW decisions and so forth. And he was dead set against it. And I said to him, Stephen, how can you be against this when your livelihood now can often depend how much money you're going to make on a decision by an umpire, and the technology now will get it right more often than not. But he said, yeah, that may be the case. He said, but as cricketers, he said, we love the idea of the human being still being involved in making decisions, even if they get a few wrong. and he said it would be a great shame if they take that away from the sport of cricket. Well, I'm interested to hear what Stephen Fleming thinks now, given the fact that he coaches a team in the IPL where there's millions of dollars on the line. So he was adamant that the players didn't want a bar of this coming into cricket. But now I think once it's been in, and we've had it for 10 years or so, no one wants to go back to abolishing it, surely, getting rid of this from cricket or rugby or football or tennis or whatever. It's an important part of the game.
All right, let's finish then on the Rugby World Cup, because this time next week, mate, we'll be talking from Paris. We've got a couple of minutes to go here. And are the All Blacks going to win that quarterfinal? Are we then going to go on from there?
Well, they've got a very poor, in fact, they've got a terrible kind of preparation for this quarterfinal against Ireland, I presume it will be. I mean, they've played Namibia and Italy and Uruguay. Well, they've scored 167 points in their last two matches. I suspect there's probably a few good club sides in New Zealand rugby that would give the All Blacks a better opposition than they've had from those two teams. I mean, Italy, after that early barrage of tries, basically kind of realised that, the writing was on the wall. I mean, so they're going into this match against Ireland in a week or so's time, and they will have had very little really testing rugby in the 5 weeks since they played France.
Yeah.
How can you prepare for a game against Ireland off the back of these terrible, meaningless games that they're playing at the moment? That's my concern. Yes, this week all these statements are coming out of that the All Blacks are back, they've found their mojo. This was a big statement they made against Italy. Yes, there's no question about their performance against Italy, but how meaningful was it? That's my issue. And I still think that not only was the draw working against the All Blacks, one or two other countries, but as a result of that, they've had all these meaningless bloody matches to try and prepare for a quarter-final.
Look, I mean, the way that the tournament is structured, lots of questions to ask about it. I mean, the bye week and everything else. And you can't tell me, Brendan, when teams used to go on tour, I was doing these stats yesterday, right? 133 matches for Colin Meads, only 55 were tests. He played every bloody midweek. I can't believe that these guys couldn't play that match against Namibia and then bounce back 4 days later and play again. Come on, man. I mean, their training sessions are probably more vigorous and probably more physically intense, aren't they? They'd have to be.
Of course they are. Of course they'd have to be, because they're not getting it on the field. You would have thought Italy would have provided some meaningful opposition. They've never been a great team, Italy, ever since they got into the Six Nations, and I suppose you could question why in God's name they're still in there. But and I think the proof was in the pudding. What was it, 96-12 or something? But no, my confidence, I'm afraid, hasn't risen much, I'm afraid. I'm trying to work out who I give the better chance of winning that weekend, Labour or the All Blacks.
Devlin.
Have you seen my wiener?
The platform.